out a video before Halloween and before the elections. So the next video that comes out after this, you know I'll be talking about October 31st experiences as well as the election. So that's what you can look forward to in the next video. But I wanted to just put out one more video in between now and then because I had some experiences that I wanted to share. And I'm optimistic that I can keep this video fairly short. As I was doing laundry today, I was thinking about people who agree with the Halloween message, that it's definitely something that we shouldn't participate in. And I was thinking about people who agree with that message, who follow my videos, who feel the same way, but aren't letting people know what side of the fence they're on or where they stand. I talked about in my past video how you can't be on the fence anymore, and we heard that at General Conference. You're either on one side or the other. And I feel that way about things like Halloween. You're either on one side of the fence or the other. And I just got thinking about how if we don't emphasize to our children and teach them the why should we not participate in Halloween? If our children just hear we shouldn't celebrate Halloween, and that's something that's been a part of your life and your traditions for so many years, it's going to be really hard for them to understand and to want to get on board. But if we explain to them the why, this is why we don't participate in Halloween. You ask them questions. Do you agree? Do you feel the same way? Does this make sense to you? And they become part of the conversation, then the wheels start to turn within their mind. And it starts to make sense as to, yes, these are the principles that we're taught in the gospel. This is what the scriptures say. This is what the Lord Himself has said about these principles. So when we participate in Halloween, we're going against those principles. When you explain it that way to your family, it really makes sense. It really sinks in. But it's one thing to have that knowledge and to agree with that message, and then it's another to let people know where you stand. I think a lot of times we're afraid. We're afraid that if we say something, we might offend someone or they might label us as self-righteous. I used to have those fears a few years ago, but I've learned over the years, the more I go about living my life in peace and happiness, but at the same time letting people know this is where I stand, we don't participate in this, and just leaving it at that, I have found that people respect that. And more often than not, they want to know why, and they open up the door for that conversation. And I have personally found that as we've had these conversations, the majority of the time, it makes sense. And the Spirit sort of takes over and does the teaching. And eventually those people walk away from Halloween as well. So we have to live by example, but we can't be quiet. We can't hide our light under a bushel. We have to be out there. We have to be standing on the hill, letting people know this is where we stand and this is why. Now, as I've said before, shining your light doesn't mean that you're pushy, that you're forcing what you believe on other people. No, it's very Christ-like. It's all done by example, through patience and understanding and kindness. And when you have all of those elements working together and you're shining your light, people watch, they pay attention. They see that you're a little bit different. You live your life just a little bit differently than everybody else in the world, and yet you're happy. So people take notice and they start to ask questions. And from there, the Spirit does the teaching. But I was thinking about all the people who are afraid to shine their light. They're afraid to let people know what side of the fence they stand on. And when they do that, I think it sends a confusing message to your family and to your children because they notice your fear as they see all things Halloween swarming around you in our culture, in the neighborhood, with church, with school, and you don't say anything because you're afraid. I think that sends a confusing and powerful message to your kids that this isn't that important. It's not that bad if I participate every now and then or in some of it, but just like Lot's wife, when the Lord asks you to walk away from something and not turn back, When we walk away from darkness, we should never be looking back and longing for that or missing it, or giving our children the impression that it's okay, we understand that they long for it, or they miss it, or they're feeling left out and they need that. I think that's where the conflict happens in a family. Our children need to see us stand up for what we believe in. That means we need to be vocal. We need to not be afraid. We need to feel comfortable shining our light and living those gospel principles. If we cower down or we hide under a bushel and we try to appear neutral on the subject or sometimes on the fence, I think that does more harm to our children and to our family and to ourselves versus if we're just true to who we are and what we believe and we're not afraid of that. I think people have a lot more respect for someone who's confident in what they believe and confident in the Lord and confident in the Spirit and in their personal revelation. People have a lot more respect for that and actually admire that and think it's awesome than they do someone who's neutral, who hides under the radar, puts their light under a bushel because of fear. I think people can sense that fear in you and sense that uncertainty and that lack of confidence, and that's not going to have any positive change or effect in other people's lives. What inspires people and causes them to change and brings them into the light, brings them to Jesus Christ, brings them into the gospel. How we gather people in is through being confident in who we are and what we believe, and having the confidence to live those principles every day in every area of our life. That's how we make a difference. That's when the Lord can really use us. He can't really use people who are afraid, who are being silent, who are hiding under the radar, who are putting a bushel over their head, who have one foot on this side of the fence and one foot on the other, who some days speak up a little bit about how they feel about an issue, but then other days sort of contradict that. On other days, they're silent. Because when you have one foot in both worlds, when you have one foot on each side of the fence, that sends a confusing message to your kids, to your family, to your neighbors, to your friends, to the world. But when you know what side of the fence you belong on, and you stand on that side of the fence with confidence, never looking back to check the scenery on the other side of the fence, right? People notice that. Even if they don't agree with you, they admire that, they respect that. And the Lord needs us to be confident in what we believe. He needs us to be confident in Him. And I feel that right now, more than ever, people are looking for that confidence. They're looking for people who know the Lord. They're looking for people who have that peace and assurance in their life. They're looking for answers. They're looking for guidance. They're looking for light. And I have found more than ever right now, people are very curious about and open to and accepting of walking away from Halloween more than ever. So I wanted to put out this message and encourage everyone out there who has walked away from Halloween to not live in fear with that decision and to not be afraid to let the world know where you stand and why. As I said in the last video message, it's time to stand up and speak up, and you will be heard. So someone reached out to me a couple weeks ago and shared this with me. I just want to share it with you. He wrote, "Hello, Lindsay. I just wanted to take this time to tell you my story of how your Halloween False Traditions video changed my perspective. To start off, I guess I can tell you that my family and I had always celebrated Halloween, like many average American families do. Halloween used to be my #1 favorite holiday. Always loved dressing up as creepy, scary characters, zombies, Heath Ledger, the Joker, etc., and decorating our home with all kinds of Halloween-themed decorations, as you probably can imagine. 3 years ago, around this time, a week before Halloween, my wife and I were helping my mother decorate her living room with witches, mummies, spiders, etc. in preparation for the upcoming holiday. During this time, my wife and I lived with my parents. We were all excited for Halloween. Then one day when I came home from work, I noticed that the decorations were gone. I asked my mother, who was home at the time, if everything was all right. She told me that everything was fine and told me that her and my father wanted to show my wife and I something later. So we waited for my wife to come home from work, and we both sat down on a couch. My parents sat across from us and asked us if we noticed anything different in our home. I already noticed that all the Halloween decorations were taken down, but my wife didn't notice until we were asked the question. My father then pulled up his laptop screen and put it in front of us and started playing your video. After going in a couple minutes into the video, I was immediately angered and resentful towards the video, that I even started walking away to go upstairs and hear nothing more of it. My parents tried to talk me into staying to hear you out, but I wanted nothing to do with it. A few minutes passed by and my wife came up to our room and encouraged me to come back down and listen to what you had to say in your video. We came back down and sat together to watch your video. As we were watching your video talking about some roots and history of the background of Halloween, I felt the Spirit confirm with me of what you said based on your research and study of the topic were true, and to hear your testimony. It changed my perspective and really helped open my eyes perhaps wider to see the bigger picture of what you shared. I've watched that same video several more times since then, and my wife also was too on board with me, along with my parents. We all threw away all of our Halloween decorations. We now feel the Spirit of the Lord more present in our home. This year especially, we are going the extra mile by putting pictures of Christ laminated on each of our doorways leading outside, spiritually fortifying our home similar to what the Hebrews did for Passover, keeping the forces of darkness and evil spirits outside of our home, especially this Halloween with all that's going on in our society this past year. This will be the most darkest Halloween season we will ever face. Hope you like my story. Wish I had more time, but our family expresses deep thanks for your videos and keep up the good fight with all your might. I love this story, and I've watched as this new friend of mine has not been afraid or ashamed to share this with his friends and family. And I've watched as he shared this on his Facebook page, the responses have been positive. I've watched as people have commented and said, "This makes sense. Thank you for sharing this." And like I said, when we're confident in what we stand for and in what we believe, people are drawn to that. And his story has been a perfect example of this. Here's my front porch right now. Every year, I just love this picture, and I have it hanging on my front door. But this year, I bought a bigger size of this picture, and I hung it in other areas on my porch. So I really love this. I feel like it sends a message, an invitation of coming to Christ, of coming out of the darkness into the light. Here it is on the wreath on my door. And then as you can see, I have pictures of Christ all throughout my home in every room of my house. I have pictures of Christ and of the temple in every room of the house because I feel like that has a real power and a real protection to it. And I really am doing all that I can to make my home a fortress against evil. So today I was cleaning the house. I had the house all to myself, and I was cleaning each of the rooms in my home. And I had this thought that when I was finished cleaning a room that I should pray over it. And I started with my son's room. So I went in and I dusted some things. I cleaned it up, made it smell better. And I noticed he had some broken pictures of Christ in his windowsill. I don't know how long they had been broken for. So I took the frames and I repaired them. I dusted them off, cleaned the glass, put the pictures back in, and put them back in his room. And as I walked out, I had this feeling to pray over his room. So I prayed over his room and I blessed it, that it would be filled with light and with the presence of the Lord, and that it would be a place and a space of protection and safety, a place where the Spirit could be, and that any and all darkness or any influences of the adversary would leave. As I was praying this over my son's room, I was standing in his doorway. All of a sudden, I heard this really loud noise and the walls shook. It was like an explosion. It was so loud and it startled me. And for a moment, I stopped. And then I just felt there's probably something really going on here. There's probably something happening in the spiritual. That was a physical manifestation of it. That prayer is very powerful. And when you call on the Lord to come into your home and clean out darkness, well, that's what happens. So as I felt that shaking, I imagined the power of the Lord pushing out the forces of darkness out of my son's room and out of our home. And so I continued doing that all throughout the home until eventually I blessed my whole house and all of our property. And it just got me thinking about how we should be doing that more often. We should be taking the time to really pray over our homes, our property, our families, the leaders of our country, the leaders of the church, that we should be taking the time to sincerely and genuinely pray over them. And that there's real power in that. And that this week, more than ever, we should be doing this. Because this is a very vital week. This is a week where the battlegrounds are hot in that battle of good versus evil. The Lord's kingdom versus Satan's kingdom. So I've been feeling for a while now to begin a fast starting November 1st all the way through the week of the election. I just really believe that there's power in prayer when it's combined with fasting. These are dire circumstances that we're facing right now. And we know from the council of the leaders of the church that tough times are ahead, that we need to prepare for coming tribulations. So I feel that the best way to prepare is to start that off with a powerful fast combined with powerful prayer. So that's what I'm going to be doing. I just want to put that out there. If you want to consider fasting and increasing your prayers, especially during this week, it can only do good. I think sometimes we get so comfortable in our routine and we just trust that, yes, God's in control. He's always in charge. And so things are going to happen how they're supposed to happen. But we forget that God also expects us to do our part. He expects us to use our agency and to call on Him to intervene. A lot of times His hands are tied if we're not calling on Him. So He's relying on us, His children, to call on Him to fight these battles. So let us not forget, especially with this week, with it being Halloween and a full moon. I just know, I can just feel it, that there's going to be so many people out there who serve the adversary and are working for him, who are going to be conjuring up those powers of darkness to fight against what it is the Lord is trying to do. To fight against the election, the leaders of our country, the church. It just really feels like things are about to get more and more intense. So we really should be stepping up our prayers and doing all that we can do to help out the Lord. So right as I was editing this video last night, suddenly this tweet popped up on my phone from KSL, and it caught my attention because it says, several residents along the Wasatch Front reported shaking this morning, wondering if it was an earthquake. The University of Utah seismographic station said it was not. So everybody across the Wasatch Front felt it, and I live way up north in Davis County, and it was powerful. It was this loud explosion, and the walls shook. It sounded like a truck crashed into my house. So it happened right as I said in my prayer, right as I asked for the Lord to cast all the darkness out of our house, if there was any darkness, to cast it out of my son's room. And right as I said those words, boom, and the walls shook. So pretty amazing. And my husband told me that this had been the talk of the news all day here in Utah. I was not aware. Someone reached out to me this week and shared with me a primary video of a lady who has the same calling that I do. She does primary singing time videos. And in this particular video, she dressed up as a witch. And she tried to get the kids all excited about Halloween. And she had a cauldron and she waved her fingers like this and implied that she was casting a spell on the children.
Welcome to a Sabbath day singing time. Double, double, boil and trouble, children sing and cauldron bubble. Okay, just kidding. Do you guys like my outfit? What is this week? Halloween? Okay, now wait a second. What does Halloween have to do with the church? Are you ready for me to tell you? Okay, ready?
Someone brought this to my attention, wanted to know my thoughts about it. And as I shared this with my kids and my husband, they were all shocked. The lady in the video went on to say why she felt that Halloween was actually a Christian holiday and why we celebrate it, and then incorporated that in with the music time, songs about the gospel. and Jesus Christ. And it's like oil and water. It just doesn't mix. It doesn't belong together. And I wanted to share this because it showed me that my kids and my husband, after having walked away from Halloween for a few years now, really are sensitive to this contrast. I've watched my husband and my kids not be afraid to let people know that we don't celebrate this, and here's why. And I've seen my kids have a huge impact on their friends and teachers. It's been incredible. When we raise our children to understand the principles of the gospel and then we teach them how to apply those principles, eventually, they come to these conclusions on their own. They make these choices for themselves. Not only is that good parenting, but that's how our kids develop a testimony, when they learn the principles and then they apply them. That's how they learn, and that's how they grow. And then they want to make those choices because of the good that it brings into their lives. And as this is the week leading up to Halloween, there are a lot of women and moms who are getting excited to do the witches' night out. And I've seen lots of posts of women, mothers and daughters, grandmothers dressing up as witches, pretending to cast spells, and just seeing how their love for this is being passed down from generation to generation to generation. I saw a video the other day that I thought was really interesting. It's a British couple. They live in England and they do these YouTube videos about the differences between Americans and Brits. And they recently did a video about Halloween and they said, we just don't really get into Halloween. And they said, us personally, we celebrate life. We are for life. We're not for death. We don't promote death. We don't celebrate death. We are all about life. And so we like to decorate our home with things that are living, with plants and flowers and greenery. And the husband said, I could never hang a ghost or a vampire or a demon in my yard or put cobwebs and spiders all over my furniture or my front porch. He said, I'm just not for that. I just can't do that. And why would anyone want to do that? What's beautiful and lovely about that? And so he said, we just don't really get into that over here, and us personally, we choose to celebrate life. And some of the things that they said, it almost sounded like they had watched my video. In fact, I've seen a lot of things lately that as people send them to me and I watch them, it almost sounds like these people have seen my video, that it's making a difference all over the world. If that's true, I think that's awesome. Now, in the few instances earlier this month that I mentioned in my last video, where there were a few people who were upset with all of the Be Clean of Halloween memes, I noticed that as people shared my Halloween video with them and said, hey, if you watch this video, you'll understand what this meme is about, or you'll understand why we feel this way. I noticed that those people refused to watch the video. And as I pondered on this, I thought, could it be that they don't want to watch the video? They don't want to learn this information because it might be right? Because if it feels right, then they might feel the need to change and to walk away. But they don't want to do that. They'd prefer to be ignorant and not have anyone bring it to their attention that this celebration might actually be inviting the adversary into their lives. And as I got thinking about that, I thought that's not the mindset of a Zion people. A Zion people want to learn. They want to know. They don't want to be ignorant. And not only that, but they want to pray for a confirmation. They want to seek out the Lord's will in all things. They want to have a knowledge and a confirmation of truth in all things. But they go about it the right way. They go about it with an honest and open heart, with good and honest intentions, in humility, with a willingness to be taught and a willingness to change. That's the mindset of a Zion people. My sister was just sharing with me today a family that she knows, and they have a huge Halloween party every single year, and their kids get really excited and they invite all of their friends. And she was telling me how this family doesn't know that she doesn't celebrate, that she's never said anything to them. So they continue to send her an invitation every year. As she was sharing this with me, she pointed out that there are people within this family who suffer from major depression and have a history of suicide attempts. and how there really is that connection of when you embrace this holiday and you participate in the celebration of all things darkness and death and of the adversary. You invite that into your life and you allow him to have power over you. You invite him into your home, into your family, into your relationships. And just like I talked about at the beginning of my Halloween video, I made that connection to all of these people who suffered from depression and suicide attempts, who also had this love for Halloween. As my sister and I were talking about this, we noticed that a lot of these people are also really into that world of video games and Dungeons and Dragons and Harry Potter and science fiction. They really have that passion for Halloween, but they also battle with depression. They also have a lot of personal demons that they battle. And we were just talking about how that really is a witness that as we open up these doors that are invitations to the adversary to come into our lives, we are opening up our door to those demons and welcoming them into our homes and into our families. And so it's really no surprise when we start finding in our life that we start having all of these personal demons that we're battling, and we feel like we're battling them on our own. It just continues to become more clear that Halloween really is a tool of the adversary. It's his holy day, and when we participate in these things that celebrate him, we open ourselves up to those attacks. But now, more than ever, we need to be doing all that we can to fortify our homes and fortify our families against the attacks of the enemy. In fact, when I put this shirt on today and I was looking at it and I saw all these arrows, it reminded me of the fiery darts of the enemy, and it reminded me of Samuel the Lamanite. When the adversary sends his arrows, they have no power over you when you're doing the Lord's will. The arrows repel, they bounce off of you. So we should be doing all that we can to fortify our spiritual armor personally, but also for our families and with our homes. Our homes need to be fortresses against evil and darkness. And this is the week and the year where we need to be fortifying our homes more than we ever have before. Something I forgot to mention in my last video message as I was talking about General Conference. I had this written in my notes and I completely skipped over it in my video. But I think a lot of us noticed this. At the end of General Conference, when President Oaks was conducting and he was saying his final words at the conclusion of the conference, he said something that stood out to me. And I think it stood out because my ears, probably all of our ears, have been programmed to hear this a certain way. At just about every general conference, this is how we always hear it. So when we hear something that sort of breaks the pattern, breaks the norm, it stands out to us. So at the end of conference, he announced the final speaker, President Nelson, and then he said, "Conference will then be adjourned." And he left it at that. And what we usually always hear is, "Conference will then be adjourned for 6 months." We always hear the 6 months, but we didn't hear it this time. That stood out to me, and I know that stood out to a lot of you. Now, yes, it's possible that it was just worded differently this time. But I know to some, it sort of left that door open to the possibility that maybe there won't be a typical general conference in 6 months. That's always the plan. That's always how it's been, is we meet every 6 months. And I have to correct myself. In the last video message, I said that in 5 years, we would have the 200th semi-annual general conference. But a few of you reached out to me and said, no, that's not how it works. We have an annual conference and a semi-annual conference every year. So I believe in the spring, it's the annual conference that we have once a year. And then the fall conference is considered the semi-annual conference or twice-a-year conference. It's confusing to me. I know it's confusing to some of you. So according to that, it would just double it, and it would be the 200th semi-annual conference or general conference in the year 2030. So I learned something new. I honestly always thought that every conference, because they're always held every 6 months, which is 2 conferences a year, which is twice a year, which is semi-annual, was a semi-annual conference. But apparently that's not the case. But it had me wondering that maybe conferences aren't going to be the same in the years to come. With all the things happening in the world and the way things are changing all the time and things are getting canceled all the time and postponed, who's to say that that couldn't happen with General Conference? Fortunately, we've had the blessing of being able to watch it from our computers all over the world, but if there ever came a time when there was some type of national or worldwide outage and conference couldn't be broadcasted, or there was some kind of major disaster, those would be the only reasons I could see interfering with a scheduled general conference. But anything's possible. So I know that stood out to a lot of people, and we thought, whoa, that was different. I can't remember any time I've ever not heard a member of the presidency who was conducting not say conference will then be adjourned for 6 months. It seems that we always hear that. So that stood out to me. I wrote it down in my notes. But then there was something else that I didn't notice that a friend of mine brought to light on Facebook, and a lot of people joined in and shared their thoughts about it. So I have a screenshot right here, and my friend said, "This isn't my words, but was shared in another group that I'm in. I'd love to hear all your thoughts on it. I know this has been shared already, but having looked closer, I don't believe the brethren have chosen the aesthetics without serious consideration here." Now she's referring to the backdrop of General Conference, which I don't know how many people were actually paying attention to. I know I wasn't. She says, "Consider the following. 7 windows which appear to show burning fire outside." Take a look. I'm going to zoom in right here. I didn't notice that. But she's right. If you look at these windows, on the outside, the view that you're seeing through the windows are flames of fire. And that's all you see are tall flames of fire out every window. Now remember, I called my last video message, the one where I talked about this general conference, "A fire was lit. Let's stand up and speak up." So fire kept coming to my mind. I kept thinking and feeling fire, fire, but I never noticed the fire in those windows. But that ended up being the name of that video. I'm also reminded of the hymn, "The Spirit of God." It says, "The Spirit of God like a fire is burning." The Spirit is often described as a fire. It goes on to say, "The latter day glory begins to come forth." And it goes on to talk about the visions and the blessings, angels visiting the earth, all the wonderful things and amazing miracles that lead up to Jesus descending with his chariot of fire. And it just goes on to say, "We'll sing and we'll shout with the armies of heaven, Hosanna to God and the Lamb." And so it made me think, could we be entering that time now where all of the latter-day glory begins to finally come forth, all of it in its fullness, that we begin to see powerful miracles and works of the Lord that we've never seen up until this point? I'm also reminded of Jacob chapter 5, verse 77, the parable of the vineyard. "And when the time cometh that evil fruit shall again come into my vineyard, then will I cause the good and the bad to be gathered, and the good will I preserve unto myself, and the bad will I cast away into its own place. And then cometh the season and the end, and my vineyard will I cause to be burned with fire." As someone pointed out, it's as though we're all joined together, we're all gathered in together watching General Conference. We're safely in this room with the apostles, with the prophet, and we're looking out the windows and watching as the world outside burns. And what does the vineyard represent in this parable? It represents the world. It's a reminder of being safely gathered in our homes, in the temple, while we watch the world burn outside. Sherry Dew once said in a BYU conference address titled, "Knowing Who You Are and Who You Have Always Been," she said, "We are among the elect whom the Lord has called during this 11th hour to labor in his vineyard, a vineyard that has become corrupted every whit, and in which only a few doeth good. We are those few. God, who saw the end from the beginning, foresaw perfectly what these times would demand. Thus, said President George Q. Cannon, God reserved spirits for this dispensation who would have the courage and determination to face the world and all the powers of the evil one, and who would build up the Zion of our God, fearless of all consequences. Yes, that's us. That's you, and it's me. Could this symbolize the imminent 7-year tribulation period? Tribulation was a major theme of the conference. Now, we talked about that in the last video message, how that was a word I wished I would have taken account on, but we heard it quite a bit throughout the talks. Furthermore, upon closer inspection, each of the 7 windows have smaller divisions within, totaling 42 across all 7 windows. 42 months equals 3.5 years. I believe 42 months is referenced in the book of Daniel. The smaller windows could signify the first 42 months being the beginning of tribulation, and as such less intense compared to the latter 3.5 years. 42 is also the number of weeks of gestation and could link with the Revelations 12 sign, giving us a time frame for the birthing of the kingdom of God. It fits in with my view that the Great Tribulation begins 2024 onward, which is 3.5 years or so away. Let me know your thoughts and insights and what the darkened 4 other windows could symbolize. The Lord teaches us through symbols, and I believe there is a message to be had here. Now, there were a lot of comments that came in on this post, and what's interesting is the night before she posted this, another friend of mine reached out to me and asked me, hey, did you notice the colors of the flowers at General Conference? They were purple and red, and I hadn't really noticed, and so I said, well, that's interesting. I know I did a video, I think it was last year, all about the colors purple and red, because a lot of us were seeing those colors everywhere and felt that there was some meaning in that. So I spent a whole section of a video talking about those colors and what they mean. If I can find that video, I'll link it down in the video description below so you can check it out. So she pointed that out, and then the following morning there was this post. So I'm going to read to you some of the comments that came through. Notice that there are 4 windows that are not lit. Could this also be symbolic of an additional 4 years until purple equals royalty, red equals blood? Look at their seating formation, like there isn't anyone at the head of it, almost as if to say the time is at hand that Jesus Christ himself will be leading his own church. I could be wrong, but very interesting. Did you notice that as well? I remember thinking, wow, at the last general conference in April, first of all, it was a lot smaller space, but second of all, they were all spread out in an even line. This time around, you had all the apostles in one room, but the way that the seats were angled, it's as though it was pointing your eyes to that focal point at the center of the room where the windows are, but there was nobody there. There was no seat. I'll continue reading the comments. Love this. Christ's throne is in the middle, at the top, in front of the larger windows and flowers. I can see him in my mind there. I looked at the 4 dark windows and immediately felt plagues. Interesting, Revelation chapter 8 talks about the first 4 plagues after the end of the half hour of silence. Chapter 9 talks about the 5th, 6th, and 7th plagues. The 5th and on are no longer for the righteous. They are for the wicked. But those first 4 plagues are for everybody. Yesterday, as I was watching smoke pouring out of Provo Canyon, it reminded me how in the first few years of chapter 8, it talks about the angels preparing the plagues. And one of the angels, at the end of the half an hour of silence, before the plagues begin, casts fire down into the earth. I feel like this world has been on fire for the last 3 years. I feel like that is where we are on the timeline, that the end of the half an hour is coming very soon, and those first 4 plagues will start. From my studies, it seems like we are in the 7 years of tribulations. The first 3.5 years are full of fire. See Revelation chapter 8. And the angel took the censer and filled it with fire of the altar and cast it into the earth. And there were voices and thunderings and lightnings and an earthquake. And the 7 angels which had the 7 trumpets prepared themselves to sound. Then the second half of the tribulation seems to correspond with the end of the half hour of silence, at which point the 7 plagues begin. The first 4 plagues affect everyone. The last 3 only scourge the wicked. Looking through those plagues, the first 4 all happen from one big event, like an asteroid hitting the earth or a giant volcano eruption or something ginormous like that. They could all happen quickly. It says the 5th plague lasts for 5 months and the 6th plague lasts for 13 months. Then he won't tell us much about the 7th, so we don't know. But yes, I've come to recently think that the end of the silence, the second half of the tribulations, and Ezra's eagle all happen at about the same time. Also, the beast or the Antichrist coming into power. It's part of it. I believe the 7 years are bookmarked by the 2 solar eclipses, which would put us in the first half of the tribulations. The second half begins this upcoming spring. The West Coast fires and major worldwide earthquakes began right after the first solar eclipse. The second one comes on the Hebrew New Year, when traditionally the children of Israel were given a sign in the heavens that they would soon be delivered. That second eclipse seems very symbolic of tribulations for the saints coming to an end. The half hour of silence also ends this spring. The 3.5 years since the sign given in September 2017 of the woman fleeing in the wilderness also ends this spring. That's in Revelation chapter 12. Many things point to this spring being a time of great tribulation coming. If you look at the prophecy of Ezra's eagle concerning the fate of the president, and look at what comes after the time of the woman's nourishment and protection in the wilderness is over, it points to some other upheaval and fulfilled revelations next year as well. The second eclipse happens on April 8th, 2024. During that same day, the Jewish New Year begins in Israel. It is only celebrated by some sects of the Jewish faith today, but it is the day when Moses was told to tell the people their deliverance was soon. A sign was given to them in the heavens, and they all rejoiced. 14 days later was the Passover. Revelation 13 talks about the beast, the Antichrist, that will have power for 3.5 years. The Ezra's eagle prophecy talks about the last president not serving out a full term. According to that prophecy, we are currently on the last president, who will have 2 terms, but the second term will be cut short. With a new term beginning next year, if it gets cut short around the same time all these other things happen, the beast will have 3.5 years of presidency, during which time he or she will persecute those with the testimony of Christ. It coincides with the days of tribulation, plagues, half hour of silence ending, all of that. The presidential term, or 3.5 years of the beast in power, would end at the end of 2024. Remember, that's when the second eclipse crosses over America and puts an X right near the New Madrid fault line. So yes, 2024 may be a big year of deliverance for the followers of Christ. The second eclipse hits on a day that is celebrated as a sign of deliverance for Israel. And the Antichrist's reign may come to an end. 2024 is also the year projected for the rededication of the Salt Lake City Temple. Interestingly enough, and someone pointed out several times, I've thought that maybe Christ will be here to dedicate the Salt Lake Temple himself. Wouldn't that be amazing? Someone wrote, I agree that it will be global. In my mind, I picture the Antichrist who takes over the American presidency as a global leader who reigns over all the earth. And yes, self-destruction from within, destruction from without, wars, natural disasters, etc., happening all over the earth. The whole earth will be in commotion. And due to the chaos and upheaval, everyone on the planet will be looking for a cause or a side to join. To me, it seems that will be the cause of the major hastening of the gathering of Israel. Everyone on the planet will decide if they will look to God for deliverance, and therefore need to know where to find him. Or they will look to the arm of the flesh for deliverance and flock to Satan's army. So missionary work will skyrocket. I believe it's why COVID has pushed missionary work to be online. People will Google search it and find it and be taught the gospel online to every reach of the planet. But Doctrine and Covenants says that people from all over the world will flock to the New Jerusalem because it will be the only safe place to go, and that Satan's army won't dare to go up against it because they know that the Lord is great and terrible, and they cannot stand against Zion. And I added, the 3 windows behind them in the center reminds me of the Godhead. Just like a president and his 2 counselors sit as 3 in church meetings and conferences, etc. So to sum this all up, people are noticing the flames of fire burning outside of the windows. In the scriptures, fire represents cleansing. The earth is being cleansed. In fact, I heard a Christian man say the other day that he had seen a vision of flooding coming to the eastern side of the United States and fires on the west. And that's what we've sort of been seeing right now. We've been seeing all the fires happening in the west. But as I thought about that, if we were to have flooding on the east and fires on the west, that pushes everybody inwards, into the heartland of the country, into the Rocky Mountains, which I believe is where the majority of God's people are, in the heartland and in the Rocky Mountains. Of course, they're spread all over the world, but it feels like they're kind of being pushed into these areas, and that God is doing something with the land. So when I saw those 4 darkened windows, plagues came to my mind as well. I thought 4 plagues. So that seems to correlate to the book of Revelation about those first 4 plagues. I follow President Nelson on Twitter, and when he put out this tweet, it popped up on my screen and I quickly took a screenshot. So he said this at this past conference, he said it again on Twitter, but you guys, he also said it once earlier this year at April General Conference. So again, when I talk about patterns and things repeating, that means pay attention. Now here's what he said. Seek to be increasingly pure in thought, word, and deed. Minister to others. Keep an eternal perspective. Magnify your callings. And whatever your challenges, my dear brothers and sisters, live each day so that you are more prepared to meet your Maker. Now here's what he said in April General Conference of this year. In his opening message, here's what he said. Our ultimate quest in life is to prepare to meet our Maker. This was right after he said, how can we endure such trials? The Lord has told us that if ye are prepared, ye shall not fear. Of course, we can store our own food reserves, water, and savings, but equally crucial is our need to fill our personal spiritual storehouses with faith, truth, and testimony. So he's talking about future trials from accidents, natural disasters, or personal heartache. And then he goes on to talk about how can we prepare for these future trials by being prepared. And he says it's our life quest to prepare to meet our Maker. So when you hear that, you think, well, that's true. You never know when it might be your last day on this earth. You never know. You should be ready every day to meet the Savior, instead of just thinking, okay, I'm ready for the Savior when he comes, and I want to be here when the Savior comes, and that's what I'm preparing for. No, we never know when we're going to meet the Savior. Isn't that true? We never know when it's going to be our last day on earth. We don't know if we're going to meet him on the other side of the veil or meet him here on the earth when he returns. Either way, we're going to meet him. Either way, we don't know the day or the hour. So you hear people say, well, we've got another 10 years to prepare, or I don't think things are really going to be that dire until 2030 or whatnot. But again, you never know when your last day on the earth might be. You should be prepared now, in the moment, every day. And President Nelson's tweet was a repeat of what he said in his closing remarks at this last General Conference, when he started it out with saying, embrace your new normal by repenting daily. When I've heard President Nelson say, Be prepared to meet your Maker. I just kept feeling things are coming where we're going to have a lot of opportunities to meet our Maker. At this last general conference, it was all about tribulations. So we know we're at that point where things are going to be chaotic. We are in the heat of the battle right now of good versus evil. And we're going to talk about that in the next video, especially concerning the elections and the future of America. There is a real battle going on right now, happening in the spiritual, but we're seeing it being manifested in the physical with all the civil unrest that's happening, especially here in America. And we know that's only going to escalate. And as it does, things are going to happen. We know this if we read the scriptures. Things are going to happen, and how can I put this positively? Things are going to happen that are going to give a lot of people the sudden opportunity to meet their Maker. I think I talked about that in my last video message, that I heard in my mind a message about tribulations and loved ones passing away and having that hope that these tribulations are but a short time and that the Savior is coming soon. So that can be our hope to get us through those hard times in the coming future. It's crazy though, because just this last week, there have been so many personal tribulations happening in the lives of so many people that I know. Just within the last week, there have been a lot of people going to the emergency room, a lot of people having close calls with death, people getting diagnosed with aggressive forms of cancer, people walking out on their marriages. I just know so many people in the last week who have had these major tribulations suddenly come upon them so suddenly. And I just feel that we're going to keep seeing more and more of that. But how we triumph over that is by not giving in to fear, not giving in to the adversary, not giving in to the enemy, but putting all of our faith and our hope and our trust in our Savior and what He's already done for us. And if we allow the trials and challenges and tribulations that life gives us to refine us, to make us better, to bring us closer to our Savior, to grow our testimony, to grow our faith in Him, if we allow those trials and challenges to have that effect over us, then in the end, we triumph. So we have to remember that that period, the tribulation period, is but a short time. We have to hold tight to the hand of the Lord, keep our focus on Him, and trust that He will pull us through these hard times, and that we will come out better and brighter when it's all said and done. What you don't want to do right now is let those trials and challenges and tribulations overcome you and pull you down and weaken your faith and destroy your testimony. At this point on the timeline, that's not what you want to do. Remember that tribulations and trials and challenges are designed to prepare us to meet our Maker. They're designed to humble us and purify us and bring us to the Lord. And thinking about being prepared to meet your Maker, as I've been pondering on that all week long, and I go on my walks in the morning and I walk past people's homes and I see graveyards and cemeteries on their front lawns and dead corpses sitting on their porch or hanging in their trees. And I think about how they're making light of and poking fun at death in this way. And then I think about the coming tribulations and how our prophet is telling us that we need to be prepared to meet our Maker. And we heard at this last conference about the coming tribulations, how they are on their way. And as I thought about that and then looked around at all of this, it just didn't feel right. And it had me thinking that maybe next year, if things are much different by then, and we've had a lot more natural disasters and big tribulations, and lots of people have lost loved ones, I think when we reach that point, people won't feel as comfortable putting those things in their yard and poking fun of death in that way. But a lot of us already feel that way now. So it will be interesting to see where people are with Halloween next year after we start going through these tribulations. But I've truly seen a lot of people this year give it up. I walked into Kohl's a few weeks ago and they were already playing Christmas music. They had up their Christmas displays. It's like they completely skipped Halloween. As many of you know, Hobby Lobby stopped selling Halloween decor. And I've been in so many stores as of lately that are playing Christmas music. And of course, Hobby Lobby is exploding with Christmas right now. So I'm starting to see that a lot of people are just skipping Halloween. They're not even in the mood for it. It's no longer appealing to them. It no longer feels good. And so they're getting rid of it, walking away from it, letting it go, skipping it, and going straight to Christmas, going to what feels good. Of course, to Christians, Christmas is about the birth of our Savior Jesus Christ. But to the rest of the world, Christmas is a time of giving, a time of joy, a time of family. And I think so many people are wanting that and are ready for that and are willing just to skip over this dark part of the year. Have you noticed that as well? Now here's a laugh for you. I saw this the other day. It says, anyone else feel like Halloween is unnecessary this year? I've been wearing a mask and eating candy for 7 months now. I don't think I need a day dedicated to it anymore. So we were reading in Come Follow Me last night, and something stood out to me. Right down here at the bottom of the page, let me read it to you. It says, Mormon's own people rejected his pleading invitations to repent. He knew that he had a larger audience to persuade. Behold, he declared, I write unto all the ends of the earth. In other words, he wrote to you. And his message to you today is the same message that could have saved the Nephites in their day. He said, believe the gospel of Jesus Christ. Repent and prepare to stand before the judgment seat of Christ. And I'm feeling it. So I stopped right there and I said to my family, you guys, this is exactly what President Nelson has been telling us. Mormon was telling his people to repent and prepare to meet their Maker. Our prophet right now is telling us the exact same thing. And according to the Come Follow Me lesson, it says that if Mormon's people would have listened to his words, if they would have listened to the words of a prophet, it would have saved their lives. But because they didn't listen and they didn't repent, they were destroyed. Well, our prophet and our leaders have been telling us the same message, to repent, to get things right in our lives, and prepare to meet our Maker. Are we also at that hinge point where if we don't listen to the words of a prophet, we too could be destroyed? Listening to the words of a prophet could save our very own lives. Those words from the prophet Mormon were to the people living on this land that we now call America. In our day, here on this same land, we have a prophet, not just speaking to the people of this land, but speaking to people all over the world. Repent and prepare to meet your Maker. And I think about our nation, and if we don't repent and turn back to God and undo a lot of the things that have happened that go against the Word of God, if we don't repent and change and turn back to Him, we very well could see the destruction of our nation. But if we repent and we turn back to Him, and we show it in the people that we vote for and the laws that we pass, our land could be spared from that destruction. We could receive another period of grace. So I believe that the Lord knows the hearts of His people, and He's going to do all that He can to help us turn our hearts back to Him. Whatever that may be, however that may look, He's going to give us experiences that will help us soften our hearts, become more compassionate and loving and forgiving, and turn to Him. Okay, let's talk about screenshots. A friend sent this to me. It's a screenshot of my last video, A Fire Was Lit, and it was message number 144. While she was watching it, look what happened when she noticed all these numbers and she hit pause. It happened to be at 11 minutes and 44 seconds into the video. She hit pause because she saw that it was 1:44 on the clock, right when she looked at the time and wanted to get a screenshot of the time. When she hit pause, it happened to be 11:44 on the video. And then down below, I noticed this, so I circled it. There's the number 311 or 113. Incredible. 144 and 113 are my pay attention numbers that tell me to stop, pay attention, and look for the message. And just a reminder that 113 is also November 3rd, which is a big pay attention number day because that's election day. And of course, 144 represents the gathering, the most important thing that we could be doing right now in this 11th hour. After my last video message, I connected two friends together, and it's been an amazing connection. And the day that I introduced them to each other, I looked at the message after I sent it, and there was my number, 113. I sent it at 1:13 p.m. Someone shared a video of a guy driving through his neighborhood, and there were these large buzzards on top of all the rooftops of the homes. I think there were about 4 homes in a row, and the birds were perched on the rooftop, completely still, frozen, with their wings spread, and it just looked really interesting, really interesting. And so people were talking about it, and I decided to do a search for buzzards and learn more about those birds. And I was in YouTube, and this video popped up, turkey, vultures, and an eagle. Now, turkey vultures are also called buzzards. So a buzzard is a turkey vulture, and a turkey vulture is a buzzard. So in this video, you have a group of these vultures gathering around, about to eat this mouse, and then this eagle swoops in and steals it. So I thought that was interesting because there's my pay attention number 144, which represents the gathering. You have an eagle, which represents America, and then you have vultures, which represent death and scavengers. And I just thought that was interesting, that there's definitely a message to be had here. Something that came to mind was, as death falls upon America, in the end, America will triumph. Or in other words, the people will triumph, especially the church, as we do all that we can to gather in Israel, as we've been asked to do, we will triumph. Then just now, as I went back into this video and I clicked on the video description, look, here's the address of the man who shot this footage. And there in his address is the number 144. There it is again, you guys. Pay attention. On a KSL story about the debate, I was scrolling down in the comments, and right there at the top was my pay attention number 113. I didn't circle it, but you can see it right there on the thumbs up. It says, I hope Trump gets enough votes to be our president for another 4 years. There was that number, 113. Pay attention. Also, November 3rd, which is the day of the election, which is the day we decide who our next president is. And again, also, 113 to me stands for third day power in the 11th hour. And the third day of November, it's going to take a lot of that third day power to help us get through the remainder of what's going to take place in this 11th hour, starting with the elections. In the scriptures, the miracles always came on the third day in just about every story. So I believe we can see a miracle on November 3rd. Here's a headline that stood out to me. It says, could the Latter-day Saint vote decide the election? Why both parties are focusing in on church members. I took a screenshot of some photos that our family took at a park. It's called the International Peace Gardens, and there it was, 113. I happened to take the screenshot at 11:13. This last Sunday, the song that we sang in church was Our Savior's Love, hymn number 113. And that again is another reminder that in this 11th hour, it's the third day power of our Savior Jesus Christ that gives us those miracles. So the miracles come because of His love. I saw this on my YouTube channel as I was scrolling down. There was message number 137, and right below it with the thumbs up and the thumbs down, you see 144. There it is again. Pay attention. Here's a message about coming into the promised land, and 144 represents the gathering of Israel. I was sharing my Halloween video with someone, and there it was, 113. I took a screenshot, another pay attention reminder. I pulled up my notes in my phone to prepare for this video, and right when I opened up my notes, right when I looked down, it happened to be 11:13. There it was again, 113, pay attention. Someone sent me this message about how the adversary would love for me to quit doing my videos. And so this was very encouraging, and I noticed when she sent it to me, she sent it at 11:13. There's that number, pay attention. So as I mentioned earlier, I would like to do a period of fasting around the beginning of November to help with the elections and to pray for our country. And while I was studying up on fasting, this video popped up, and there it was, 113311. Pay attention. Here's a news story that takes place in Italy that a friend shared with me. As I was scrolling down and reading through it, this stuck out to me. It says, "And the official did not hide the fact that he thinks nothing of the occasion itself," referring to Halloween. "Halloween weekend is immense idiocy, immense American stupidity that has been imported to our country." So I kind of laughed when I read this, and it's a story about COVID-19, how it's a growing epidemic, and how this city official is trying to put a stop to celebrating Halloween in his city, how people are upset with it. But he's pointing out not only is this not safe because of our COVID epidemic, but it's pure stupidity. We just shouldn't even be celebrating it, aside from it being COVID. So I thought that was hilarious, and I just had to share. Now we've talked about the significance of the 2 moons that are happening this month, the 2 full moons, and somebody sent this to me and added some additional insight. It says, "The full moon that will be visible on October 31st is called the blue moon because it's the second full moon of the same month, following the harvest moon of October 1st through October 3rd. And in a rare treat, the 2020 Halloween full moon will be visible to the entire world, rather than just parts of it, for the first time since World War II." And my friend wrote, "This is most likely the last full moon falling on Halloween before the Lord returns." Okay, here's a commercial I've been seeing all over YouTube lately. It seems to play before every video. It's a Jack Daniels commercial, and it starts out playing some eerie, creepy music, and the alcohol pops up and it says, "We don't care much for ghosts." Then it says, "But spirits are our specialty." And suddenly all of these spirits start swirling around the bottles of alcohol. And then it says, "Summon yours now." Then it has a link below that to Jack Daniels' website where you can go look and make purchases. This really stood out to me because I've talked about in past videos how there's a reason that alcohol is called spirits. When you drink alcohol, you're opening yourself up to spirits. You're opening yourself up to the demonic. You're opening yourself up to attacks. That's why when people drink alcohol, it's called being under the influence. Being under the influence of what? Of who? Well, of these spirits. They're actually poking fun at truth. They're actually giving you the truth in this advertisement. They're letting you know that yes, we are spirits. When you drink Jack Daniels alcohol, you are summoning spirits. So what are you waiting for? Summon yours now. This popped up in my YouTube feed. There was that number 113 and also 111, which I also see a lot. Now this is Bill Weiss, or Bill Weiss, depending if you say it the American or the German way. Anyways, he wrote a book called 23 Minutes in Hell. And I remember first hearing about this 12 years ago. He's a pastor, and I believe the story goes he was going to bed and suddenly he had this vision, and it was so real. He could see his wife, he could see what was going on in his house, but he wasn't in his body. And he fell into hell, and he got to experience it for 23 minutes. And he talks about how horrible it was, how terrible it was. And he feels that his life ministry is to now warn people about the reality of hell, that it's a real place where you don't want to go. So I thought that was interesting that it's popping up with the Halloween videos. And 23 represents the 23rd hour of the day, which is 11 p.m., which is right before midnight. It is almost midnight, and we need to prepare to meet our Maker. These headlines stood out to me. Dem Civil War coming, and batten down the hatches. Wildfires, snow, tropical storms bring tumultuous week for U.S. We have storms in D.C., and we have storms happening in the physical. My sister called, and I wanted to see how long we had been on the phone because it had been a while, and I look and it happened to be 44 minutes. Then I looked at the time and it happened to be 11:44. Of course it was. So I had to take a screenshot and pay attention to what it was we were talking about. Now, this is an interesting experience. Here's a man that reached out to me, and we had a phone conference call yesterday. He recorded it, and he is the creator of a new app that he's currently seeking investors for, and he was doing some research. He was looking for authors who he could interview about his app so he could get some feedback. And he did a search, and my name came up. So he reached out to me, and it turns out he's a fellow Latter-day Saint. And so we did this interview, and I answered his questions. And in the end, he asked me if I would like to be a part of piloting this app. So I said, sure, I wouldn't mind doing that at all. And it was interesting because right when I looked up, it happened to be 1:44 p.m. So there was the pay attention number 144. And of course, I had to get a screenshot. The other night, I went with my two oldest children to the store to grab some things, and everywhere I looked, I'm not kidding, I kept seeing the price, $1.44. Here it is for apples, and here it is for Belgium chocolate pudding. So I did a search for apple and Belgium, and this news article popped up. It says Belgium launches COVID-19 exposure notification app using Apple Google framework. So it talked about how Belgium is the latest country to use this contact tracing technology. So definitely something to pay attention to. I sent off an email and I noticed that I happened to send it at 1:44 p.m. This was in relation to a project that the church is doing, and they had reached out to me and asked me to submit something for it. So I may talk about that in another video, but when I sent it, it happened to be at 1:44. And this is something that's centered towards the youth of the church, the younger generation, and so it just reminded me that this is part of the gathering. That same day, I received a notification for an order for my business that I do on the side, my skincare line. And that order happened to have an address of 144. So I'm telling you, I see this number all day long. I see it just about every hour, sometimes many times within an hour. Here it is on a Dutch Sense video. I was scrolling down and reading the comments, and someone had posted timestamps of all the topics that he covers in this video. And there it was, the word West Coast. Pay attention. There's the number 144. Again, it's the gathering. Again, I talked about with everything happening on the West Coast, with the earthquakes and the fires, it's bringing people in towards the Rocky Mountains, and then everybody on the East Coast is coming in to the heartland, and that's part of the gathering. So there's the gathering number connected to the West Coast, and then if you look down, there it is again, 144, connected to the United States of America. It says earthquakes in the last 24 hours in the USA. So there it is, pay attention. And just a reminder that the Pope's Global Pact on Education took place this month on October 15th. And I just noticed, I didn't even circle this, look down below under the comments, there's that number 144. It's backwards, it's in reverse. So that usually to me means it opposes the gathering. When I see numbers sometimes in reverse, it has a reverse message. So this would have to do with the opposite of the gathering, the opposite of what it is the Lord's trying to do. That just came to me. I just noticed that right now. So I went in to see what took place at this event. Remember, it's been postponed because of COVID. It was supposed to take place in May of this year. So here's a screenshot I took of a tweet from the Pope. It says, he wrote, "It's time to subscribe to a global pact on education for and with future generations. This requires commitment from families, communities, schools, universities, institutions, religions, governments, and the human family to train mature men and women." Now remember, this is that united global religion that he's putting together, and he has asked the leaders of many organizations and religions to come on board and sign this pact, to become a part of this, to where there's just one world religion and everything is one education. It's basically what we refer to as one world order. Satan's plan, the opposite of what it is the Lord is trying to do, the opposite of Zion. This is a forceful way of bringing everyone together. And it actually takes away freedom. Now here's an article I found that talked about this event. It says, parents were outraged after it was reported that diocesan schools were indoctrinating children with atheism, gender fluidity, queer studies, identity politics, and indigenous spirituality. In 2019, Church Militant reported on an LGBT education program that was being used by Catholic primary schools after it was authorized by the Archdiocese of Liverpool. The same program triggered nationwide protests among Muslim parents. Catholic authorities in England have endorsed the government's new RSC laws, which override parental rights and normalize same-sex marriage and transgenderism to children as young as 4. So this is what this is bringing about, this unity where they want everyone on the same page, not just within the Catholic Church, but all over the world. It's one world order. Here's another screenshot. It says, Pope Francis in shift for church voices support for same-sex civil unions. So things are radically shifting right now in the Catholic Church. And I'm not quite sure what to make of this, you guys. This is a screenshot I took while I was driving in my car. This song came on, and I looked down and I noticed this number all over the place. Up at the top, you see it's 11:15 on the screen. And then down in the time length of the song, when we hit pause, it was 1:15. So there's the number 1:15 all over the screen. I'm not sure quite yet what this means, if it's a date, January 15th, I'm not sure. Maybe this will have meaning somewhere down the road. But the name of the group is called the Cold War Kids, and we all know what the Cold War was. And then last, today, this was really interesting. I got in the car to drive my kids to school, and this song came on the radio. I think it's by Corinne Bailey. It's called Put Your Records On. And I said, oh my gosh, I haven't heard this song in over a decade. This is pretty old for you guys. So we were listening to the song. I thought it was interesting that I hadn't heard it in a while, and there it was. And then later on, I get in the car to go to my doctor's appointment, and this song comes on the radio. It's the same song, Put Your Records On, but it's by someone else called Rit Momney, which is a play on words for Mitt Romney. So I thought, okay, this must be an artist from Utah, and that's how he's letting people know that he's from Utah. And when the song ended, the DJ came on and said, this is a brand new song. It just came out today. We're the first to play it. It's by a Salt Lake City artist. He goes by Rit Momney, and he did a rendition of Put Your Records On. So I thought, well, that is so interesting. Twice within an hour I've heard this song. Well, get this. I walk into the doctor's office, and what song is playing in the doctor's office? Here it is again, this song by Rit Momney, Put Your Records On. So I hear it 3 times in a row, all within an hour. Again, when I say, you know, pay attention to things that repeat, pay attention to patterns, there's always a message in that. So right now, I don't know if this is having to do with Mitt Romney. I'm not sure what I need to be paying attention to here. This just happened today and I haven't had time to ponder it yet, but just wanted to share. I know that Mitt Romney is one of the only Republicans that I'm aware of who is not voting for President Trump, and he has been very vocal about that. So I don't know, maybe we need to pay attention to Mitt Romney and what's going on there, or things that may be coming down the road for him. Now this is interesting too. I had a couple of people completely unrelated reach out to me within a 24-hour period, and they both shared with me that they had had a dream about water shortages. Something about a shortage of water, or water that we're not able to drink, and both of them had a strong impression in their dreams to fill their homes with water. Like I said, when things repeat, there's always a message in that. Because I received 2 messages from 2 separate people within a 24-hour period, I thought that that was something worth sharing in this video. I also want to share some good news. My friend Elizabeth that I talked about in my last video message, she's getting baptized this week. So keep her in your prayers that all goes well, but she's excited and I'm so excited for her as well. Someone else who reached out to me reminded me how in the scriptures we read about the city of the New Jerusalem descending from heaven onto the earth. And I talked about that in a video message last year. How in a couple of scriptures it talks about the city of the New Jerusalem coming down from heaven and landing upon the earth. And In that video, I talked about how we're always looking and waiting to see people start building brick by brick that city, and that when we see that happening, that's how we'll know things are really close to the Lord returning. But I pointed out in that video that according to these scriptures, we just need to have a place for this city to land. And so this person reminded me that, again, there are so many people who are looking and waiting to hear some kind of announcement about the city beginning its construction and to actually see people being called to build it brick by brick. But she reminded me that no, the city comes out of heaven. It's all there. And it would make sense that it would also include the temple. So just another reminder that that could happen at any time. And a lot of times we look so far and sometimes so close that we miss the mark. Here's a quote that someone recently shared. It says, "The greatest events that have been spoken of by all the holy prophets will come along so naturally as the consequences of certain causes that unless our eyes are enlightened by the Spirit of God and the Spirit of revelation rests upon us, we will fail to see that these are the events predicted by the holy prophets." That was from George Q. Cannon. Anyways, I'd love to hear your thoughts about this. If there's anything you'd like to share with me about today's video, feel free to reach out to me anytime. I'd love to hear. Thanks so much for joining me today, you guys. I hope you're having a wonderful day, and I hope you have a wonderful week. I pray that you'll all stay safe, and I will see you next time.